Today we're going to dive into a story not just about a sport, but about a country of 1.4 billion people, and the single man who carries their entire collective sanity on his shoulders. Hope you enjoy. Imagine a pressure so immense it could crush steel. Now imagine waking up to that pressure every single morning, knowing that if you fail, an entire subcontinent weeps. In India, cricket isn't a game. It's not entertainment. It's a secular religion, and the men who play it are treated as gods. But gods don't bleed. Gods aren't allowed to have bad days. To understand how a human being survives that kind of existence, you have to go back to December 2006. In a small, dimly lit room in West Delhi, an 18-year-old boy was staring at the floor. His name was Virat Kohli. He was chubby, he was loud, and he had a temper that flared up at the slightest provocation. But on that specific night, his world was silent. His father, Prem Kohli, the man who had driven him to cricket academies on a scooter, the man who believed in his dream when no one else did, had just passed away from a sudden brain stroke. The family was devastated. The funeral was being arranged. But Virat was in the middle of a crucial 4-day match for Delhi. If he didn't show up, his team would lose and his career might stall. The next morning, as the sun began to peek through the smog of Delhi, Virat Kohli walked into the dressing room. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was blank, but he had his pads on. He didn't say a word to his teammates. He just picked up his bat, walked out to the crease, and scored 90 crucial runs to save his team from defeat. He didn't celebrate when he hit the boundaries. He just looked up at the sky. Immediately after he was dismissed, he walked off the field, drove straight to his father's cremation, and watched his mentor turn to ashes. That was the exact day the boy died, and the machine was born. He realized that life was fragile, but runs were permanent. He made a silent vow to his father's memory. He would not just play the game. He would conquer it. By 2008, the world started noticing the fire burning in Delhi. Virat led the under-19 Indian team to a World Cup victory, and suddenly he was thrust into the glitz and glamour of the senior national team. But he wasn't the quiet, submissive rookie India was used to. India's cricket idols had always been saintly, soft-spoken figures like Sachin Tendulkar. Virat Kohli was the exact opposite. He wore his emotions on his sleeve. He swore at the opposition, blew kisses to hostile crowds, and celebrated every single wicket like he had just won a war. The old traditionalists hated him. They called him arrogant. They called him spoiled. They said a boy with that much attitude would burn out before he ever became great. And for a moment, it looked like they were right. He loved the fast life. He loved the street food of Delhi, the butter chicken, the sweets. He was talented, yes, but his fitness was average, and his discipline was fluctuating. In the inaugural seasons of the Indian Premier League, he was flashy but inconsistent. He would score a brilliant 50 and then throw his wicket away the next game because of a rush of blood to the head. The turning point came in 2012 during a tour of Australia. The Australian crowds are notoriously brutal, and they targeted Virat, screaming insults at him from the boundary ropes. Anyone else would have shrunk under the pressure. But Virat turned around and showed them his middle finger. He was fined, he was criticized, but in the very next match in Adelaide, he scored his maiden Test century. Amidst the boos and the hostility, he stood tall, pointing his bat at the critics. He proved he could survive in the trenches, but when he returned home and looked in the mirror, he wasn't satisfied. He saw a young man who was letting his talent go to waste. He saw a reflection that was soft. He realized that if he wanted to be the best in the world, he couldn't just rely on his natural skill. He had to change everything. He had to become something else. What followed is perhaps the most radical transformation in modern sports history. One day, Virat Kohli walked into the Indian dressing room and declared that he was giving up everything he loved. No more gluten, no more dairy, no more cheat meals, no more comfort. He transitioned to a strict, rigid diet that looked more like a scientific experiment than a meal plan. Steamed vegetables, black coffee, and calculated grams of protein. He turned the gym into his temple. While his teammates were resting or enjoying their fame, Virat was putting his body through absolute administrative torture. He lifted weights until his muscles screamed, ran sprints until his lungs burned, and measured his body fat down to the decimal point. He became an absolute fanatic about fitness. The results were terrifying. On the field, he became a predator that never grew tired. In the game of cricket, running between the wickets in 50-degree heat is a test of human endurance. Virat made it look like a stroll in the park. He would tire out the opposition simply by running them ragged. This was the era of the king of chases. Whenever India was down, whenever the target seemed mathematically impossible, Virat Kohli would walk out to the middle. His eyes would glaze over into a state of deep psychotic focus. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't listen to the noise. He just calculated the required run rate like a computer. He would dismantle bowling attacks not with reckless violence, but with surgical precision, hitting the ball into the gaps, running hard, and executing under extreme pressure. Between 2014 and 2018, he entered a godlike peak. He scored century after century, breaking records that had stood for decades, turning the art of batting into a repetitive, flawless ritual. He had become the undisputed king of world cricket, and the 1.4 billion people who worshipped him finally felt safe. But a crown made of gold eventually starts to bleed into your skull. By 2017, Virat Kohli was handed the captaincy of the Indian cricket team across all formats. He was no longer just the best batsman. He was the leader of the entire empire. His method of leadership was absolute mental tyranny. He demanded that every single player in the team meet his impossible standards of fitness and aggression. If you couldn't run as fast as him, if you couldn't train as hard as him, you were out. For a while, it worked. India became the most feared Test team in the world, winning historical series in Australia and dominating at home. But the pressure of being Virat Kohli was accumulating. Every single day, his face was on every billboard across the country. Every time he dropped a catch, it was debated on national television. Every time he failed to score a century, the media wrote obituaries about his career. Then came the drought. The year was 2020. The centuries stopped coming. He was still scoring runs, but that magical, robotic consistency was gone. The matrix had broken. For nearly 3 years, over 1,000 days, Virat Kohli did not score a single international century. The very fans who had worshipped him turned into wolves. They said he was finished. They said his marriage to Bollywood actress Anushka Sharma had distracted him. They attacked his family, threatened his child on social media, and demanded that he be dropped from the team. The captaincy was stripped away from him section by section amidst political drama within the cricket board. He was left stripped of his power, vulnerable, and completely exposed to the judgment of the world. The monster he had created to protect himself, the aggressive, unyielding ego, was no longer working. He was staring into the abyss of his own professional mortality. But the true measure of a king is not how he rules during prosperity, but how he crawls out of the grave. In late 2022, Virat Kohli did something he had never done before. He took a break. He walked away from cricket for an entire month. He didn't touch a bat. He didn't look at the gym. He went to the mountains with his family, away from the 1.4 billion voices, and searched for the little boy from West Delhi who just loved to play cricket. He returned during the Asia Cup against Afghanistan. You could see it in his eyes. The tension was gone. The anger had softened into something far more dangerous, peace. In that match, he scored his 71st international century, breaking the 3-year curse. He didn't shout. He didn't swear. He just smiled, kissed his wedding ring, and laughed. A few months later, at the T20 World Cup against Pakistan at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, in front of 90,000 screaming fans, India was dead and buried. The win probability was less than 5%, but Virat Kohli was still at the crease. What followed in the final 3 overs was a display of sheer human will that defied the laws of physics. He hit 2 impossible sixes against the world's fastest bowler, turned a lost cause into a miraculous victory, and fell to his knees, punching the turf in raw, unfiltered tears. It was the ultimate redemption. Today, Virat Kohli stands as a living myth. He broke Sachin Tendulkar's record for the most one-day international centuries, a record everyone thought would never be touched. But his legacy isn't the numbers or the wealth. It is the blueprint of absolute devotion. He showed an entire generation that greatness isn't about being comfortable. It's about looking at the chaos of the world, looking at the crushing weight of expectation, and choosing to stand tall anyway. That's all from Mango. Thanks for watching.
Bye.